And this class is all about retouching inside of Lightroom. And it's not just about retouching in Lightroom, but it's about retouching quickly in Lightroom. My name is Jared Platt. I am a Lightroom user for, well, since it began. So I've been using Lightroom from the very beginning. I love the program, but I really love the advancements that it's made in the ability to quickly do massive amounts of work all at the same time. So in the beginning, it was all about, well, I can select images fast, I can find images fast, I can adjust images fast. But over the last, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, the ability to really work on images and do localized adjustments has come in. And then, in addition to that, the ability to do some retouching and smoothing skin and that kind of stuff has come in to the point that I rarely have to go to Photoshop. I shoot weddings and I shoot portraits and I shoot a lot of commercial work. And on a given wedding, I might, let's say I'm doing an album of 60, 70 images. I might go to Photoshop for 10 of those images, maybe. And so really about 5 to 10% of my work goes to Photoshop. And that's because I can do so much inside of Lightroom that will make the image good enough to show to the client, and even sometimes superior to some of the work that I might do in Photoshop. So we're going to talk about the control that you have over retouching inside of Lightroom. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how to do that retouching in bulk so that you can do a lot of the work on multiple images at the same time. So let's get started. We're going to start here in a portrait session that I took. And you can see here's the portrait. These are the selections. We're not seeing the outtakes, but we are seeing all the selections. And then, of course, I left some images in here just for informational purposes so you could see what our images look like before and after. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and choose a couple of these images to work on, and we're going to talk about the process of retouching those images. But the first thing that we have to do is, well, let's choose something that needs a little more work. This one's pretty good right out of the gates. It's pretty bright. But let's talk about this image here because it obviously needs some basic color grading and work done on it. So we're just going to take those images and we're going to adjust all of them at the same time. And the reason I'm showing you how to adjust all of them at the same time is so that you understand that concept of synchronizing your images and the changes that you're making. So here I am looking at the one image, but you can see that down at the bottom, I've got all of these images highlighted. So all the images that I have highlighted, because I have the auto sync button on, that means that all of them are going to have the same adjustments made to them at the same time, which is really important for my workflow. I want to work on one image and have all the other images changed at the same time. So we're going to go in and start adjusting first the exposure. And I'm just going to get the exposure up just enough that I like the general look of the photograph. I'm paying a lot of attention to her, to the subject, but I also am paying attention to everything else as well. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to get her perfect and then have everything else too bright. And so I'm just paying attention to the entire photograph, generally speaking. And of course, while I was shooting it, I was paying attention to the photograph, and I was lighting her so that her and the background were lit at about the right level. But we're going to solve some of the issues that I may have had because I kind of want it to be a little bit more dark and brooding of a photograph. And so I'm going to just kind of play around with things in general until I generally like everything. I'm going to take the black down a little bit so that I have some more contrast, but I'm going to bring the shadows up just a bit so that I have a little bit nicer look in like her dress and her face and shadows and things of that nature. Then I'm going to play around with the highlights. Don't need to necessarily come down all that much. I can bring them down, but see how it messes with her face. So I don't necessarily need to do much with that. But I am going to take the whites up because that helps her jacket and her face quite a bit. So I think that's probably as good as I need to do with the exposure settings themselves. And then I kind of want the whole thing to pop a little bit more. So I'm going to take the clarity up just a little bit so that her dress is a little bit more impactful. Her face is a little sharper. The separation of the bushes and things like that are a little bit better. So I'm just doing that. And now I'm going to go into the detail area, and I'm going to make sure that I'm zooming in to make sure that I like the noise, which this was shot at, let's see, this was shot at 50 ISO. So it obviously is nice and clean. Don't have to worry too much about that. The sharpness is perfect, so I don't need to worry about that. But I am going to go into the lens correction area and make sure that I get rid of any chromatic aberration, because I don't like chromatic aberration, and oftentimes on trees and things like that you'll see that. So I'm getting rid of all of those global issues with the photograph. Now I'm going to go back up to my basic area, and I'm going to make sure that I have the right profile on here, and I'm just going to use portrait as my profile. And you can see how it kind of softens things up. Now this was shot with a Fuji camera, and so I actually have some additional profiles that I could use. So I'm going to go into the profile browser, and I'm going to go to the camera matching. And you can see that I've got all these really great profiles. There's no better camera on the planet than a Fuji camera for profiles. I love Fuji for their profiles. And so I'm just going to scan through and look which of these profiles makes my image feel like what I want it to feel like. The flat is quite useful when you have a lot of contrast, but you definitely have to work on it a little bit more. I'm actually a fan of this one, which is the natural. Portrait is a little too warm for me. I'm going to go with natural. All right. And now, with that in mind, I'm going to now go in and make sure that I have the right temperature and tint. So we're just going to make sure her skin looks nice. And while I'm making her skin look nice, I'm also looking at that sky, because the sky needs to be a little bit bluer, but I don't want to make her skin too blue. So I'm going to split the difference between a blue sky and her skin, because I can always work on her skin later. So I'm going to pull down the sky just a little bit. There we go. That's a pretty good natural skin tone. And then she's got a nice blue sky above her here. And now I'm just going to go back in and play around with my tint and make sure that I don't have it too magenta or too green. Just kind of playing around with it until I think it looks fairly natural. And readjust this one just a little bit. There we go. Okay. So now I like the general look of the photograph, and I know that I can work with it. I've got it pretty much set the way I want it. So now I'm going to start playing around with the various areas inside of the photograph. So we first start globally, and then we're going to go in and start working on various areas of the photograph. Now, for those of you who are working on landscape photographs, you gotta get outside your own head for a second and think, okay, this is a landscape photograph. It just happens to have a person in it. And so everything I do here to this photograph can be done to your landscape photographs, or to your photographs of animals, or to your photographs of cups on a table, or it doesn't matter. Photographs are all the same. It doesn't matter what's in them. They are just objects inside of a photograph, and then your job is to basically paint with light and make them look interesting. And so don't think, oh, well, that's a portrait. I can't look at a portrait and learn from that. You can. Everything I'm doing here can be done to your photograph, no matter what your photograph is of. Okay, so I'm going to come back in here to this image, and I'm going to start working on the specific areas of the photograph that need some help. For instance, one of the places that needs help is the sky itself. I want it to be a little bit darker and brooding, and so I'm going to actually go in and click on the gradient tool, and I'm going to go down to in the sky, and I'm going to draw a gradient across that sky. Now you'll notice that the gradient in the sky already had some settings on it up here. So I already had some settings. I'm going to double click the word that says effect here, and that's going to reset all of my sliders. And then I'm going to simply grab those exposures and bring them down. I don't want to go too far because it starts to look dingy. So I'm going to just bring the exposure down just a little bit, and I'm going to add some more blue to it so that it's a little bit nice. It's not as murky. Just adding a little bit blue helps. And then I can also take shadows down just a little bit, and I can bring the whites down just a little bit. And then once I've done all that, I could even bring the saturation up just a little bit, add a little bit more blue in there, and then I can grab that top of the gradient and drag it down. Let me turn on the selected mask overlay, which you do by going to the bottom left-hand corner and click on that little checkbox. That way you can see where the mask is happening. So I'm going to grab the mask, and notice that I'm making the mask happen faster into even just a line, or slower by moving this up or down, or I could do the same thing by bringing it down and up here. So I'm just bringing that down, and I can grab the center, the pin, and move it back and forth as well. All right, so I'm bringing this down until it does a pretty decent job at darkening the top, but leaving the bottom fairly light so that we've got that natural gradation that we normally see in the sky. So I'm going to turn off the overlay so you can see what's happening there. But the problem is that it's happening to everywhere. It's happening to her as well. You can see that it's happening there. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to use a tool. That tool is called the range mask. And I'm going to click on that range mask, and I'm going to choose a color. So now we're going to mask this image based on a certain color. So I'm going to click on, so I've clicked on the range mask and I've chosen color, and now I'm going to click on that little color dropper, and I'm going to come up into the sky, and I'm going to grab blue. So I'm just going to drag a square around all the blue that I want to be affected by this range mask. So I got to go way down here into the lighter areas, otherwise I'm not affecting the light blues. So I'm going to click on that, and boom. Did you see how the range mask cut out the tree, and it cut her out, and it cut all these bushes out? So now when I turn off the selected mask overlay, you can see that I've got a really nice blue sky, and whatever I do to that blue sky is affecting the sky, but not necessarily her. And there's a little area here or there in her hair that's kind of bluish, and so it gets affected. But generally speaking, it's cutting her out. The beauty of that is that I have just affected my sky and made it a little bit more dark and brooding. It's not too dark and brooding, but it's good enough. But I've manipulated that sky without manipulating all of the items that I want to keep normal, like her. And that gradient that I've just done has also been done to every single one of these images down in the bottom area. They've all been auto-synchronized. So now if I go to any of these others, when my camera is moving and she happens to be moving, so if I click on, say, this one here, you can see that my gradient is avoiding her again. It's cut out because that color mask overlay is on top of her. And the same thing over here, it's cutting out of her, and it's going to constantly be cutting out. Now, to some degree, it will spill onto her depending on how shaded she is. So if there's a little bit more blue, you might see a little bit more of that mask overlay. For instance, here, if I increase the amount of the overlay, so each range mask, you can increase or decrease the overlay. If I decrease the amount, it cuts her out even better. You can see how that mask is kind of going off of her shoulders now. And if I increase it, it spills more. See how it's spilling onto her hat right up in here. So I'm spilling more or I'm spilling less. And so as I'm doing this, keep in mind that it's doing them to all of the images. So I'm just trying to get the best possible mask overlay for all images at the same time. So it's a good idea to start with one and then move over to the next one and just see if you can get all of them to have a similar effect so that you're getting the right amount of overlay for all of the images. You don't want it to go like that where you lose it. So you're kind of just finding the happy medium, which looks like around 32 is the happy medium. There. So now I'm going to turn off the selected mask overlay, and I'm going to do just a little final work on this gradient. I'm going to bring the exposure down just a little bit. There, I like that. That looks pretty good. And it's done it to all of our images. You can see that those images are changing down here in the film strip. So as I click here, you'll see that it's darker here, but she hasn't darkened down. So as she moves around the frame, and she could be skipping through the frame, it's going to cut her out of the sky, and it's going to darken the sky, but not her. Okay, so now that you understand the principle of a mask overlay, we can then start working with a mask overlay in all of these areas, which is absolutely fantastic because now we can start working on her skin and on her coat and on these bushes because we know that each one has a color or has a luminosity to it, and we can identify those things by that color or luminosity. So now, again, I'm still holding on to all of these images, and I'm going to go, let's go back to that main photo, and let's zoom in here to her, and let's just create something for her skin. So we're just going to work on her skin, and I'm going to click on the, I could do two different things. Obviously there's a gradient, we just used that. There's a radial gradient, which makes a circle, and you can put things in the circle or outside the circle, and we're going to choose to go inside. Or I could use the brush, and I could be very accurate about painting with the brush. So for instance, I could click on this brush, and I could come in and start painting on her face. So I'm going to turn on the overlay so you can see it, and I can just paint her face in, and maybe right here on her hand. And you think, oh, well, that's not very accurate. That's okay. I don't have to be super accurate because I've got that same range mask right here inside of the brush. And so I can click on the range mask and choose a color, and then click on the little dropper, and I'm going to draw that dropper across her cheek, and boom. You see how accurately it cuts her out? Now, there's a little bit of spill. You can see that there's some spill right here, but that's okay because it's not going to do too much to it. And if I find the spill offensive, I can always come into the amount and drag it down and see how it cuts it out a little bit better. If I go too far, it'll cut out even her lips, but sometimes it'll cut out like a shadow on her cheek or something like that. You can see it happening right here. Parts of her hand are getting cut out because they're a different color. And so if we don't want that to happen, we either have to increase this amount a little bit so that it bleeds over the top of those colors, or you could click on the little color dropper again, and you can hold down the shift key and add that color that seems to be being cut out. So I can just draw a little square over that color, and now that color is available, and now that color is available. So I've increased the number of color swatches that are able to be used in this. But notice on her chest, it's getting really splotchy. And that's because we are being way too accurate with our color range. So I'm going to take the color range up just a little bit so that it's no longer splotchy right here on her skin. And that's okay, but see how it's cutting out her eyes, and it's cutting out her hair, and it's cutting out her dress and her coat. So I'm really happy with what I've got there. So I'm going to turn off the selected mask overlay, and now you'll be able to see that I'm going to double click the effect so that we get no effect. And now I can play with her skin. I'm only playing with her skin, so I can take the exposure on her skin up just a little bit. I can take the temperature on her skin up just a little bit because remember, I brought the whole thing down a little cool because I wanted the sky to be blue. And so this is the smallest part of the photograph that I want to change. So it's the easiest thing to change. So I'm going to warm her skin up just a little bit. And I'm going to go into the texture slider right down here. And I'm going to bring that down. And that's going to smooth her skin up quite a bit. And I can even bring the clarity slider back down. Now, I wouldn't bring the clarity slider down if I hadn't brought the clarity slider up for the rest of the photograph. And so all I'm doing is neutralizing out the clarity that I put into the whole photograph by pulling it back out so it's not making her skin more clarified. So I'm unclarifying her skin, but then I'm detexturizing her skin. And you can see that I can add or subtract how much of that texture I want. I don't want to go too far, but I don't want to go too small. So I'm just going to get the right amount. And then let's zoom back out. And the beauty of this is I've got this great skin now, but now watch what happens if I go to another photograph. So I can just go to this next photograph over here. And instead of clicking on the photograph itself, which just selects the other photograph and keeps all of the other photographs selected, I'm actually going to click on the frame of that photograph. And by doing that, I have deselected all of the other photographs and I'm only selecting the one image. So now I'm going to go back up and you can see that the pin is still selected, and notice that it cut her out even though she's completely different. So she's in a completely different circumstance. So this is the one we just did, and this is what that mask looks like. And then we go to this one, and there's another pin right here. It's the same exact burn or dodge or mask but notice that her eyes have changed position, and yet the mask has remasked her. And notice that her hand, where the mask was on her hand, is gone because her hand completely moved. And so what's happening is there is a mask sitting on this image in a specific place. And that mask is then being told only affect things that are in this color range, which is beautiful because now I can go in to this mask specifically, and I can, let's turn on the mask overlay, and I can just add a little bit of paint right here on this side. And notice that as I paint in the mask, it automatically cuts out her eyes, and it only follows the areas. So I don't have to remask the whole thing, and it's already cut out to accept her hand and to accept her neck and her face, but not her eyes and not her teeth and not her hair. So it's really easy now to just go through the entire set of images, image by image, and just look for, oh, this one, see how it changed completely? So now I can just grab that pin and drag the pin. Oh, see how the mask is coming in and it's starting to go over her face. And as soon as I get it in place, there, it's covering most of her face. And all I have to do is go in and just add a little bit on this side and down on her neck some, and then right here on her hand. Now notice that this one, there's a lot of change in this. There's some blue over on this side, on the other side of the face. And so at this point, I can take the amount slider and just increase it so that it starts to bleed over the rest of her neck. And I can click on the color dropper and just simply add a little bit more of this side of her face so that it comes back into play. And when that happens, occasionally it'll start to spill further than you want it, but that's okay because you can just go into the erase tool and just erase out those little areas that you don't want necessarily. So that's pretty simple to do. And if you happen to be getting close to something, like for instance, when we go into her hair, see how that hair is getting close to her face, we're going to simply click on the auto mask feature here on the brush. It's on the erase and it's on auto mask, so that when I come in and start auto masking out, it's just going to see the edges of her hair and it's not going to get her skin. It's just going to work on the hair itself. So we can be pretty accurate about what we do. Now, her hair is fairly gold, just like her skin, so you have to be a little bit more careful. But once you get further out from her skin, you can just turn off that auto mask by hitting the A key, and then you can remove anything else that you want from the mask. And so now you can see that this one has been masked. And this one is a little further away from the light as she swayed over to the other side. And so her face is a little bit darker. And so I can take that exposure up just a little bit to deal with the fact that she kind of swayed away from the light. And that's good. Now let's zoom back out. And we can go through each one of these photographs to see how it changed. Now, I'm going to go and try something a little different just so that you see that there are other ways that you can accomplish this. So for instance, I can highlight this whole set of images again. But I'm actually just going to highlight this set over here. And I'm going to go in and click on that pen and delete it. So we're going to do it as though we had never done that type of a brush adjustment. And we're going to go into the radial gradient. And the radial gradient is a little bit better for these kind of things because you know that you have a face that's moving within a target. And so I'm going to create a radial gradient that is actually inverted. You can see that little invert right below the feather option. And that means if it's inverted, everything that happens in the gradient is going to happen inside the circle rather than outside the circle. So inverted means in the circle. So I'm going to click on invert, and then I'm going to turn on the selected mask overlay so you can see what's happening. And I'm just going to draw a circle right around her face, just like that. And if I know, in this case, you know, her dress and her coat are pretty much the same as her face a little bit. And so I don't want to just do the whole thing because I'm going to be smoothing her skin. So I'm just going for her face right now. And once I do that, I can actually create, so the feather is all the way at 100%, but I could go to 0. See how the feather is just a hard circle, and the effect's going to be exactly the same pretty much. But I'm just doing this so that you can see what this is like. So now I'm going to go into the range mask. I'm going to choose a color, click on the color dropper, and then I'm just going to draw a little area right across her cheek. Boom. See how you can see that right here, where things are the similar color as her face, you see the hard edge. But up here, it just disappears because the blue has no similar colors. And so you don't see the circle at all. And now we can take the feather and play with the feather and so that it decreases itself as it gets to the edge. But we can also change the range amount. And by doing that, we further remove the effect that it has outside of her skin itself. And then once we get there, then watch what happens when I go from this image to the next image. See that? It follows her because she's within that circle still. And if she happened to have moved outside that circle, I can move the circle. And then I'll simply go to the next image with the arrow key and grab this and move it, and then go to the next image with the arrow key and grab this one and move it. So as long as she's similarly placed, you don't even have to move the arrow. And it's just a matter of going from image to image to make sure that your target is still in this similar place, and you can just move those targets. And if you have her move all the way to the other side of the frame, you can simply highlight all of those images and grab one of those targets and move it, and it'll move it on all of those images. And you can readjust the target as necessary in the adjustments that are happening in that target as well. So you can see how easy it is for you to work on an image that you have 5 or 10 of them that you need to work on and you want a smooth skin. Just smooth them all at one time. don't try and smooth them at different times and work on each one individually, because we want to do the bulk of our work, the bulk of all the work that we can do on all the images all at the same time. And we can do that to the sky, and then we can do it to the skin, and then we can do it to the other parts of the photograph as well. So I'm going to go into these images, and I'm really only interested in the images that I have, you know, either a 1, 2, 3 star on. So those are the ones that I'm actually going to provide to the client. So I'm going to click on these 4 images. These are actually the ones that I want to work on. And so I'm just going to simply click on this and go into the develop module. This is kind of my hero image, the one that I like the most. And so now I'm going to go in and start working on all the other areas of the photograph, including her hand, because her hand is a different color. It was cold out there, and so her hand was getting a little bit purple. And so I'm actually going to go into her hand, and we're going to use the gradient again, because the radial gradient, and we're just going to circle around her hand, and I'm going to use the color range mask and choose the color dropper and just drag it across her hand so that it just selects her hand. I'm going to double click that effect so that we have everything zeroed out, and then I kind of want to brighten it up just a little bit. It seems a little dark, but at the same time, I also want to play with the color because it's kind of a purple. I'm going to go into this little tool here called the hue. You can see that purple, we want to get rid of it. So we're going to grab the hue, and notice that I've got fine adjustment selected. I'm going to click on that, make sure that's on, and I'm just going to drag this to the right and to the left, and see how I'm playing around. It's purple, now it's not purple, purple, not purple. So I just want to get rid of the purpleness on the hand. That's all I want to do. So I'm going to drag it. Oops, starting to get a little green there, but that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to warm it up just a little bit. And I think that's pretty good. Let me just see if I can, instead of using the exposure, let's try and use just the whites. That's probably better. It's just brightening up the highlights in the hand rather than the shadows. So that's pretty good. And let's zoom out and see what we've done. And we'll turn off that gradient. That looks much better. So I can actually see her hand. It doesn't look really dark. It doesn't look purple. I like that. Now I've got to kind of darken down all of this stuff around her, because the light, which is this box over here, is spilling onto some of these, which I don't like. And so I'm going to go in and darken up everything around her. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to take a gradient, and I'm going to go up like this. And that's good right there. And notice that I've created a gradient that spills across her, and I'm going to darken things down. So I'm taking it down like this. I'm going to take the whites down. I'm going to take the highlights down. I'm really trying to subdue all of this stuff. I don't mind it glowing a little bit. I just don't want it to be bright and in your face. And so I'm darkening all of that stuff down with one swift gradient. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the range mask, and I'm going to choose a color, and I'm going to choose that green color right there. So by choosing that green, I'm going to shift and click a little green over here, a little bit green right here, a little bit of green right here. And so now you can see what's happening. See how it's starting to, it goes up, but it totally does not hit the blue sky. And it starts to get her coat, but that's okay. It's all right if that gets a little dark. I just don't want her face to get dark. And so I've got all this darkening, but it's starting to create a cut right here at the edge of the landscape. So right there at the horizon line, which is great. And then I can take the amount and bring it down. See how it starts to only affect the bushes, or I can go up and it starts to spill past them. So I'm going to kind of do a happy medium there. And let's see what it looks like. So now I can really play with this and see what kind of effect I'm getting out of it. And by the way, when you darken down a color, you actually richen that color. So I'm going to take the saturation down a little bit so that it also does not get, because I don't want the greens to get super green as a result of getting darker. So I've kind of managed what I want to do there. I like the way it looks. I just don't want her coat to get darkened. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in, and again, remember, this is happening to all of our photographs. So it's happening to this photograph, it's happening to this photograph, it's happening to this photograph. No matter where she moves, it's doing the same type of cutting. It's cutting at the horizon line, it's cutting at her coat, generally speaking. So it's doing the same work no matter where we are. But at this point, I just want to go in and remove it off of her coat. And so I'm going to start at this image, the furthest image, and I'm going to go into so when you're in a gradient, I'm going to go into the brush settings of that gradient, and I'm going to go to the erase tool in that gradient, and then I'm going to go to the auto mask feature in that erase tool. So now I have an auto masked erase tool, and I'm just going to simply go to her coat, and I'm just going to go like this. And I'm just erasing out her coat. That's it. And then I'll go to the next one. And I've still got the selection. It's just a new selection. You can see I'm just gonna erase out her coat. Come over here and erase out her coat. I don't have to be super accurate about it either, but the auto select feature, the auto mask feature, allows me to do some pretty accurate work without being fussy. And I hate being fussy because I have other things to do with my time than to try and be fussy about how perfectly I'm selecting something or masking something. So I'm just pulling this out and done. Now let's see how everything looks. That looks great. Now this one, notice that it's got a gradient there. It's got a gradient here. And now what I want to do from here is I want to go in and I want to work on this light here, because I want that light to look, I just put like a little, so the ProPhoto C1 is a little tiny light about the size of it's like the head on a flash, but not the body. And so I can put it anywhere as a light source. So I just put it there as a bulb, but I didn't have it bright enough. It wasn't bright enough to create like a whole light source inside there, but it gives me that center of the light source. But I want to finish it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of my images again. And you notice that this is all the same method being used over and over and over again. We do the bulk of our work all together on one photograph, on all the photographs at the same time. And then once we've done the bulk of the work, then we go in and manipulate each one and kind of retweak it or move the gradient around. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the brush settings and I'm going to double click the effect. Now I want you to notice something. There's a little drop down menu right here next to the effect panel, and it allows you to save anything that you've done as a preset. And by the way, as a bonus to this class, I am giving you every single one of these presets. So in the PDF that you download with this class, you are going to get all of these presets, but you're also going to get an instruction manual on how to install them. So we don't want to cover them here because we don't have as much time as we would like, but you will know how to install all of these by putting them in the right place, and then you will have all of my presets. So you're welcome. But in those presets, it's more important that you understand that you can make them. And that is here at the very bottom of this list, you can save whatever settings you've just created as a new preset and then name it, and it'll be in this list. But what I want to do is this lights on neutral. So I'm just going to turn a light on, and look, this is what it's done to the settings. So it's kind of played with all of these settings in order to create this lights on effect. And so, and there's not a lot of settings that go into it, but it's when you get into other ones like lights on with soft light flare fill, then it gets really interesting. So you can see that one's pretty interesting. In fact, maybe we'll use that one. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here with a brush, and that brush is going to be full on. So the flow is 100% right here, and the feather is at 87%. And I'm going to go in and I'm just going to paint that light on. And it's okay if I spill over, no big deal. I just want to create a glow in that lamp. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and use the I'm going to turn it on erase, and then the auto mask is on. And I'm going to zoom in here on this photograph. And now that the auto mask is on, it's going to see the edge of that lamp, and I'm just going to paint back out the edge of that lamp. Just like that. Very good. Then I can even get a little closer to it. And by the way, if I want the black edges of that lamp to come back in, all I have to do is go back over here to the black edges of this and go like this and say, I want black and I want shadows to come down. And see how the shadows and the blacks are coming back into play because I started to bring black and shadow back into the adjustment. And so let's add a little contrast in there. So we're getting closer, but I can still come in here and just paint out that black area of the wrought iron. And again, I'm still on auto mask, so when I'm clicking on remove, it's just auto masking out the remove so that I'm only removing from the shadows themselves. There we go. So let's zoom out and see how we did. We did all right. And so now at this point, I want to change the effect of that. So I'm going to zoom in here and show you that. So next to the effect, there's the effect we're using. If you click on this little triangle, it closes up all of those and turns into an amount slider, which means that you can then take the whole effect and make it less or more. So I'm going to go less with it, so that's 0, and I'm going to start increasing it. See how I'm lightening up that glass? Keep going, and I'm almost there. That's pretty good right there. So you see how I've just created an effect in that glass that makes it a little bit more natural of a light. You still see the original light source in there, but it's also glowing on the entire area so that it looks more like it is a glowing lamp. And then, of course, if I want to do a little bit more on that, I could take the radial gradient and I could choose lights on again, and I'm going to invert it so everything's inside, and then I just simply grab from here and drag out like this, and then I'm going to turn the feather out is on all the way, and then I'm just going to again turn this onto its amount slider, and I'm going to take it all the way to 0, and then just barely start to warm it up. See how I'm going to zoom in on this again. Oops, back up a little bit. See how as I warm it up, it starts to glow outside, which is what light would normally do anyway. You would see a little bit of light emanating from that. And so I'm just looking for that moment where it doesn't look so obvious and it's not 0. I'm looking for it. It's brightening up the center, but it's also brightening up right around that lamp just a little bit in a very symmetrical way. And so then I can kind of, get that thing centered, and I could say, okay, well, it would be a little bit taller, or actually in this case it would be less tall and it would kind of go out like that. See how I'm broadcasting the light? And then I might have to tone it down just a little bit. And then let's zoom out and see what that looks like. Yeah, that's pretty good. It gives it that glow. And then if for some reason you wanted to kind of do this a little bit, it might make it look a little bit more natural as well, because it would be kind of skewing at a different angle. So now I've got a little bit of a glare from the light. I've got the light itself, the glow, the casing is glowing. The foreground looks pretty good. The sky looks pretty good. and her face is just a little bit darker than I would like, but we can solve that with one more adjustment on her entire body, not just her skin. So I'm looking at all of these, and look, lo and behold, our light is floating in the air. And so now what we're going to do is we're just going to go from image to image and simply grab our light and move it over, and then go to the next image. And you're saying, well, wait, you left that little floating. That's okay. Right now, all I'm concerned about is that radial gradient. I'm moving that. And then I'm going to go into the brush settings, and I'm going to go and grab that one and move it so that it's right there. Now notice that it's bigger than the lamp. That's okay, because I can just zoom into that lamp. Remember, I did the bulk of the work at the same time, and then it's just a matter of coming in to the erase brush and coming in and doing a little bit of work on this one portion of the image. And then zoom in a little bit more, get rid of those lines. And if we need to repaint over the top of something, we can always come in and repaint right here. And then if we zoom back out, there we go. So we can do that to all of our images. And then once we've done that, I'm going to go back inside here, and I'm just going to choose, let's say this image right here. I like this image the best. This is the one I'm going to work on. The rest of them are going to get a similar adjustment, and then I'll just have to go in and tweak those as well. And I'm going to go in like this, and I'm just going to, all I'm going to do is just brighten this up, just taking the exposure up just a little bit. And keep in mind, I don't have to be super accurate, and I don't have to be really worried about what the original adjustment is until I'm finished with it. So that's too bright. So I'm just going to barely brighten it up just a little bit. And I'm going to take the whites up just a little bit. That's pretty good. She glows a little too much though. Let's bring her down just a little bit. Okay, so let's zoom out. I like the way she looks, and that has been affected on all of these. So I'm just going to click on the next one. Let's go to this one. And so now I just want to go in and do one final adjustment to her entire body, just to brighten her up just a little bit. So in order to do that, I'm going to go into the brush settings, and I'm going to choose one particular image. So let's just choose this image, and we'll brighten her up on all of the other images at the same time. And I'm just going to go in with my, double click the effect so that I neutralize everything. And I'm just going to bring the exposure up a little bit and the white up a little bit. And then I'm going to go in and just start brightening up her skin and her coat. And that's it. So it's really only taking up kind of the midtones and the highlights, and the shadows are staying where they are. So that in itself is almost like an auto a mask situation. So what I'm going to do is double click the effect so that I reset all of the sliders. And then I'm going to bring up the exposure a little bit, and I'm going to bring up the whites a little bit. So it'll only affect midtones and highlights. It's not going to affect the shadows, and that's kind of like an auto masking situation to begin with. But then I'm also going to turn on the auto mask so that it's only going to brighten up those big chunky things that I'm working on rather than spilling over into the blue. So I'm just going to go and work on her dress right now, or her coat right now, and on this side of her coat right now. Then I'm going to work on her skin. And you see how it's just selecting those areas that I kind of worked on. And that looks pretty good. Let me just zoom in and make sure that everything looks good, because I don't want to just leave it to chance. And let me look at that overlay so you can see what it's done. And you can see that it spills a little bit, but I was working on her skin and it didn't do anything to her eyes. I could go in and remove the adjustments on her shoulders, but it doesn't look like it's causing us too much of a problem. So there's no reason to work on something that's not causing you a problem. And so I like the way it looks. And now everything here has also been given that same treatment. So I'm going to click on this image, and you'll notice that it's slightly off. So I'm just going to hover over this, and I'm going to bring it closer to her. And then I'm just going to make sure you click on the frame itself. And now all I have to do is go into the erase on this and just erase out this area here and erase out this area here, like so. And that's it. And now that one's finished. So you can see that I'm doing the bulk of the work on all the images at once. And then I'm adding a little bit of finesse on each individual image as I go along. Now, the last thing that we're going to do to a photograph after we've done all this work is we're going to go into that photograph, get in nice and close, and we're going to do a little spot removal on some of the blemishes. And the reason that we do the blemishes last is because we get to see what our effect did, so our skin smoothing and all that kind of stuff, help to avoid having to do extra work to the photograph. And so now I'm going, and furthermore, if you actually, here's another little tip, this is just a little extra freebie. If you have someone who has some blemishes, especially if you have like a senior portrait where you have a lot of blemishes, and you don't want to be retouching blemishes for the next 25 hours before the client actually sees them, you can always come down into the effects panel and simply go into the grain area and turn it on. And notice, see how you can see the blemishes in her skin, and then as I turn the grain on, they start to become less obvious, especially the inconsistent areas. And so I'm just going to turn on the grain and bring up the roughness just a little bit, and then I'm going to play around with the size of the grain and see how it kind of unifies everything. But look, as I zoom back out, it's fine. The image looks good. So it's not like it makes the image bad by graininess. It actually creates a little bit of beautiful depth into the image. And you can always turn the grain off later, but allow the client to see it with the grain on because it helps to unify the skin. So if that's the case, then you actually can come back out here and you can zoom in. And you can say, okay, the grain has unified most of the skin. Now I just have this one here that I got to get rid of. And I've got this one here. And so I'm not zooming in on a minute level. I'm just grabbing the ones that I can see at a distance with the grain on and with all of my effects on her skin on, so that I'm only getting rid of blemishes that are necessary to get rid of. So I've gotten rid of the blemishes. I think she looks great. There's only one part that I don't like, and that's right here. You can see that there's kind of a patch of skin that's a little dark. A lot of the times you'll get this like under someone's eye, you'll have those dark shadows under their eyes that look like they didn't have much sleep. She doesn't have that issue, but she does have a little dark patch right here on her skin. And that's probably just a shadow or something like that, but I don't like the way it looks. And so I'm just going to do one last thing. And this is a really interesting trick because you can do this trick with shadows under people's eyes, with wrinkles, laugh lines, things like that. So I'm going to go and I'm just going to highlight this area right here. And it's going to choose a piece of skin. But you don't have to choose a piece of skin. You could actually choose the sky too. Watch what happens when I choose the sky. Nothing. See that? You don't see sky. It actually just puts a wash of because it grabs the tonality, but it knows what the color is that it's supposed to have. And so it uses the two to intelligently form something over the top of it. And so you can use anything, but sky is a really good, if you don't have skin to use sky because that's a really nice unifying tone. So I'm going to use the skin because I have it. And then once I've got that, I'm just going to come over to the opacity slider right up here, and I'm going to grab that opacity slider and drag it down to 0. Now you can see the shadow, and then as I increase it, you're going to lose the shadow. So I'm just increasing it just a little bit at a time to see when I lose the shadow, so that I no longer, I still want a little bit of that shadow, because if I don't have some of the shadow under their eyes or some of the shadow in the wrinkles, it'll start to look plasticky. And so I don't mind a little bit of shadow, but I'm just kind of playing with the opacity. Usually when you do this, like 30% is the right amount. But because this was such a soft shadow to begin with, it really actually takes us up to, I guess, 86 is a pretty good place to be. And so now I'm going to close down my, my work on this image. Now, this is the one place, if the person if the person is perfectly still, great, you could actually synchronize all of this. But if the person is moving around, yeah, you don't want to do that. So just retouch the person for each individual image. But remember, most of the work that you're doing to any portrait can be done all at the same time, the bulk of it. Now, the last thing I'm going to do to this image before I show it to the client is I've got to do something about that softbox that we see up in the top left-hand corner. So I'm going to go into my retouching tool. I'm going to change my opacity all the way up. I'm going to bring my feather way down to like 18 or something like that. And then I'm going to increase the size of that brush, and I'm just going to get rid of that softbox. So the next time you are doing portrait work, I want you to stop and think, what do I absolutely need to do to these photographs, and can I do them all at the same time? And the answer is, most of the time, yes, you can. Remember to start with the image itself and all of the global adjustments. Then look to the sky and the foreground and see what you can do to get those things under control on all the images using the range mask. And then look, what can I do to the skin and to the person's coat and to any specific areas of the photograph? What can I do to those things all at the same time? And then go image to image and correct anything that is amiss after that. And if you think that way all the time, you're going to save a ton of time, and you're going to be just as happy with your images. Again, my name is Jared Platt. Please look me up. I would love to hear from you. And if you're interested in more presets, more Lightroom education, or even education on how to do better lighting or better photography, you can always find me at jaredplatt.com.